In honor of Military Appreciation Month, Verizon thought of a lot of different ways we could show our appreciation, like rolling out the red carpet, giving you your own personal marching band, or throwing a bumping shindig. At Verizon, we're doing all that in the form of special military offers. That's why, this month only, we're giving military and veteran families a $200 Verizon gift card and a phone on us with a select trade-in and a new line on select unlimited plans. Think of it as our way of flying a squadron of jets overhead while launching fireworks. Now that's what we call a celebration, because we're proud to serve you. Visit your local Verizon store to learn more. $200 Verizon gift card requires smartphone purchase $799.99 or more with new line on eligible plan. Gift card sent within 8 weeks after receipt of claim. Phone offer requires $799.99 purchase with new smartphone line on unlimited ultimate or postpaid unlimited plus. Minimum plan $80 a month with autopay plus taxes and fees for 36 months. Less $800 trade-in or promo credit applied over 36 months. 0% APR. Trade-in must be from Apple, Google, or Samsung. Trade-in and additional terms apply.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But D.C. politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
This week on Unforgotten. So today we have a special guest, Mr. Everette Johnson with the Alabama Crime Victims Compensation Commission.
While we are a state agency, we're not your typical state agency, engaged in helping people at their most vulnerable time.
There's cases where, it's an accident. It's just like person stepped out in front of a car and they accidentally hit him and then they fled. But then there's the contributing factor. If they would have stayed for the accident, would the person have lived?
Another commissioner has to have either been a direct victim of violent crime or been closely related to someone who was a victim of violent crime.
We do get those messages, and having resources that we can share with families that come to us with those cases so that we can say, hey, look, were you aware that this is out there?
Trying to get our agency running more efficiently and serving our victims in a better capacity, that needs to be done yesterday.
Hey everyone, this is Sellers.
And this is Stormy.
And this is Unforgotten,
where each episode will highlight unsolved missing, murdered, and suspicious death cases in Alabama in order to raise awareness and hopefully obtain some answers for victims and their families.
Please remember that any individual referenced in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law, and any opinions or views expressed in the podcast are solely those of participants. Listener discretion is advised, as some of the content discussed in the podcast may contain violence or graphic descriptions and may not be suitable for all audiences.
And now for Season 2's Episode 3, Alabama Crime Victims Compensation Commission.
Hey guys, and welcome back. First, a significant development out of Mobile County. On Sunday, May 11th, Sheriff Paul Birch announced an arrest in connection to the 2017 death of Joyce Chastity Beausarge. 64-year-old Ralph Pollock was taken into custody over the weekend in Key West, Florida, where he's currently being held on charges of obstruction and abuse of a corpse. Sheriff Birch also stated that he hoped to have Pollock extradited back to Mobile by the end of the week. This was very unexpected news. I didn't expect to wake up to seeing this on the news feed on Sunday, but I am really happy to see it. This has been going on for a long time. My understanding when we were researching this case was that Pollock had been showing up to work like he was supposed to up until the point that Mobile County started questioning him in connection with Chastity's death. And then he just kind of disappeared. So it seems like he's been on the run ever since. So it'll be nice to see her family finally getting some answers. Next up, some exciting news for us at Alabama Cold Case Advocacy. We're honored to be named finalist in 2 media categories for this year's NAPPY Awards: Favorite Local Website Blog and Best Local Facebook or Instagram Page. Voting's already started, and it runs through June 1st, and you can cast your vote daily at votenappies.com. Your support truly means the world to us. And if you're looking for a way to show up and give back, it's time to lace up those sneakers. Registration is open for Vocal's Voices of Victims 5K happening on June 21st, 2025. We've posted the link on our social media pages, and you'll also find it, along with the NAPPY voting link, in the episode description. Finally, a big congratulations to Cedria Dixon, the winner of our at-home DNA kit giveaway. Thanks to everyone who entered and helped us spread awareness in the process. So today we have a special guest, and I'm super excited about it.
Me too.
We have Mr. Everette Johnson with the Alabama Crime Victims Compensation Commission. And I've met Everette a couple of times at different events, just kind of in passing. But you cracked me up because we always speak to each other, but then we saw each other at the Attorney General's vigil and the vocal vigil this year. And you were like, hey, I see you all the time. What's your name again?
Yeah. I'm notorious for that. I recognize faces, and then what's even worse is when I call you by the wrong name. So if I ever do that, please don't. Yeah.
You have, when you are standing there and you have all these people that are coming up and introducing themselves, they remember you because they've got one person that they're talking to.
Right.
But you have all these faces that are coming by you. And I leave things sometimes and I'm like, I'm going to have to go back and look at that book that I got from in there because I have no idea who these people were.
Oh, yeah. Just a funny story. I actually experienced that problem. This guy comes in and I know him. I knew who he was. I knew exactly, but I ended up calling him by his wrong name, and he never cued in on that. And I was so happy that I walked away and I'm like, that's not his name. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. So anyway, but.
Well, at least it hit you after the fact. So it just seemed natural. You just thought that was his name, and there was no sudden awareness on your face, because that's the worst when it hits you in the middle and you're like, oh gosh.
I can fake that all day long just because I do it all the time. I'm a natural. So.
My face gives me away every time. I have the worst poker face.
Well, thank you for having me on. This is a great opportunity for me, and I have been looking forward to this for some time now. I love talking about what we do and who we are. So I certainly appreciate this chance and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the ACVCC.
Well, it was sort of ironic, I guess. I don't know the right way to say it, but I come from a law enforcement background. I retired from the Montgomery Police Department, and then spent a few years following that, going around and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and was happy I was a regulatory investigator during the time that the announcement came about the opening for this position. And I'm almost 30 years in the law enforcement community. I didn't know that this agency existed, and they work a lot with law enforcement. So it really took me off guard that there was some place out here that actually helps victims of crime in the way that this agency does. So I looked at the job announcement and thought a lot about it, and was able to catch an interview. And I joked that I tricked the commissioners into hiring me. Here I am 2 years later, and they seem to be okay with me at the moment. So every day I try to keep them happy.
Well, that trick worked, obviously.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
But it's been a incredible experience, and this work is it's amazing what we're able to do. And we can't heal these people, but we can at least give them some comfort in taking some of the challenges and the burdens they experience because of the victimization, and and taking some of that away from them, and giving them a positive outlook on some of these situations. So.
And I think it's a great thing, because a lot of times what we hear from families is that, they feel very alone a lot of times in dealing with this, especially whenever they their friends and their family, they haven't been through this situation. So they might be empathetic to the situation, but they can't really understand it entirely. And it's having organizations like yours and Vocal and us to kind of be there to walk along with them sometimes is really helpful. And it gives them support that they might not otherwise have. So tell us a little bit about the commission's, like how it got started and what is its mission in general.
Oh yeah. Well, we are a state agency that was created by legislature back in 1984. We're the 40th state in the union to have a victims comp commission, and it was actually sort of started off by then President Reagan signing the Victims of Crime Act and creating the Office for Victims of Crime, which is an arm of the Department of Justice that creates funding to help these victims. And so a lot of states started creating these agencies. We're funded through different avenues, and part of that is grant funding from the Department of Justice. But our job is to help eligible victims of violent crime get compensation for expenses that are paid, that they have to pay or that they have incurred because of their victimization. Medical bills, hospital stays, funeral costs, counseling. We pay for travel for court proceedings involving court cases. A wide array of things that we can provide payment for.
And these are things in the kind of overview that you had emailed me. There is kind of there's a time limit, like you need to apply within a year, right, of the event occurring.
That's correct. There are some eligibility requirements that were created by the law. You have to be a victim of violent crime. You have to apply for compensation within a year of the incident. You have to cooperate with law enforcement, and you have to report that crime within 72 hours of it occurring. There are some good cause exceptions that we will take in regards to that and the 1-year deadline, but those are case by case situations. Also, you cannot have contributed to your own victimization, meaning, if you're involved in a drug deal and you end up, your loved one's involved in a drug deal and they get killed in the process of that, then we consider that like contribution, and we would not be able to pay for that. You have to be legally present here in the United States unless you're a victim of domestic violence or human trafficking. And then any payment cannot benefit the offender. An example I give of that, we had a claim many years ago where these two brothers were fighting each other, and one ends up killing the other and was charged for murder of that brother. And the mother filed a claim on behalf of her deceased son. And in the process of the application, the process of us working this claim, she made a point that she was going to use the money to pay for the legal defense of her son that was charged with the crime.
Oh.
And that ended the eligibility requirement right there.
That's a little bit conflicting.
Oh, absolutely it is. So, we can't, if we understand that the funds are going to help the offender, then that denies your eligibility for a claim.
Okay. This is just a hypothetical. You have two people who are in a vehicle. One is drinking and driving. They get into a wreck and the passenger is injured. Is that something where the passenger, because the one that was drinking and driving, like if they're severely injured, or dead, I guess, because that happens, if it's a relative or whoever, would them or their family be eligible?
Probably not, because they did contribute. Even the passenger, obviously the driver would not have been, but the passenger, if they knowingly got into that vehicle with the knowing that the driver was intoxicated, then I mean, we have had claims similar to that where we've had to unfortunately deny those because we consider that contribution.
That you said that, and it reminded me the contributory negligence. That I'm a litigation paralegal, so that's where my mind always goes. Is that when you have lawsuits come in, you look to see, is there any way that they could have contributed to what occurred? So it's like a contributory negligence thing. Did you knowingly do this?
Right. And, we get those a good bit. We have a bar fight and they take it outside and it escalates to someone pulling a gun and shooting the other. We'll look at that a little bit closer too as far as contributory conduct. If you had just walked outside and calmed down and stepped away, would it, would the situation have de-escalated to the point that you're not being a victim, or you're not injured or worse in that situation. So, those things we do take into consideration. When it comes to the 1 year deadline, we have a what we call a just cause that the applicant can apply for to basically just provide us a statement as to why they waited past the 1 year deadline. And I look at those in regards to like juvenile victims that may not have either known about us or were not in a place in their life that they could apply because they have to be, an adult to apply for compensation. Right. So I'm really focusing our staff to try to keep up with those victims to make sure that they're aware of us when they become the age of majority, and to perhaps even track them down when they become that age to, hey, you're eligible for these things. Let's help you out. Right. It could be a counseling situation where they could continue to receive counseling if their services were turned off because they become an adult.
And in some of those scenarios, maybe they haven't even been through counseling because, they couldn't afford to go through counseling, but they need it.
Right.
And that made me think of another question, which was, do you have to know who the offender is?
No, we don't wait for, you don't have to know who the offender is, and we don't have to have a conviction in order to compensate that person.
Okay.
So we're not waiting for, typically we're not waiting for like a grand jury indictment or even a adjudication of a case. Some claims we do because we do a lot of interaction with law enforcement. We obtain incident offense reports and statements from law enforcement in regards to these specific cases, and they weigh heavily on our decision as far as contribution or not. And if it looks like, based off law enforcement's investigation, that there's a self-defense claim involved in that incident, then we may wait to see what the grand jury decides to do on that. Gotcha. And if they choose to go ahead and true bill it, then we'll go ahead and we'll process that claim. Something else as far as eligibility that I passed over and didn't mean to is the applicant cannot have a pending felony conviction or be charged with criminally injurious conduct at the time of application. We don't go back and look at criminal history, but we do pull their current status and aliquot. And if they have a pending felony trial coming up, we have to wait till that trial is adjudicated before we're able to finalize that claim. We'll hold it until that case is adjudicated. So if they have that pending felony out there, we can't compensate them until that's done with.
And so that's like no active like assault cases or anything like that.
Right. Well, that's any felony. And then what we call criminally injurious conduct is any, whether it be misdemeanor or felony, that involves an act of violence.
Okay.
So, we watch for those as well, and then are able to make a determination after those cases are done with.
So when you have somebody that wants to make a claim they go and apply online. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Or generally?
Yeah, we have a application online. They can download it. A lot of our victim service organizations have a copy of the application in house, and they fill it out and send it back to us, and we get to work on processing it.
So, how does the process of determining their eligibility go once they've given you all the information that you've asked for? What is is there a particular review process or?
Like an interview
Yeah.
or
We do speak with the applicant. Once the application comes in, then we notify the applicant that we've received it. We try to set up an initial rapport with them, contact with them that we received it, and we're going to be asking for additional information if we need it. And then in the meantime, we go out to our law enforcement partners and ask for instant offense reports and a little form statement from them about the incident. And if there's expenses associated at that time that we know of, we'll go on out to service providers like hospitals or funeral homes and have them send us those invoices, or if the applicant is paid out of pocket, then provide us receipts for those expenses, and then we review those. Our specialist reviews those and makes a recommendation on whether to approve or not approve those claims or applications based off of what the law dictates. Mm-hmm. And then they're sent to me for a final review. And and then I make a determination to approve or deny them. If the claimant or applicant is not satisfied with my decision, they can appeal my decision to the commissioners. And we have formal administrative hearings that our commissioners sit in. It's basically like court. The commissioners are sitting there as judge. We have a administrative law judge that makes sure everything is done properly. Our general counsel represents the commission and the decision of the commission. And then the applicant can bring in witnesses, and we bring witnesses in and basically have a mini trial, so to speak, in regards to that. And then the commissioners will make a decision on whether to uphold my decision or overturn it. And that's usually how that happens. And then they can also appeal it to circuit court and or district court, and then from there up to civil appeals court. Just depends on what they're willing to go through to have that decision taken care of. We currently have a case that's going to civil appeals court involving a hit and run. And for the years, the commission has had the standing that a hit and run is not a criminally injurious conduct. The injuries occur at the time of the accident. The leaving the scene of the accident is not, while it's criminal in nature, that leaving the scene did not cause the injury, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we have an applicant who has challenged that, and it's going to the civil appeals court here in the near future. And we're excited about that because we want to do the right thing. So however the justices rule on that, we feel like we win either way, if we're with helping the victims or with our standing on how we feel about that.
And that's a hard one to argue because we have, we've seen cases where there have been arrests made for murder or
vehicular homicide.
Yeah. And hit and run cases. But then we have a case down here in Mobile, actually, where they know who it was. It's the Christian Hollis case. He was hit on the causeway, and the guy left the scene. They know who it was. He took his van to the next day to be repaired, whatever. And nothing's ever happened with that. He's never gotten charged with leaving the scene of an accident, nothing. And so, that's a hard thing because sometimes there are contribution factors there.
And that would be absolutely. And we, if we learn those things, then that plays into that particular situation.
And I was thinking, there's cases where, it's an accident. It's just like
Yeah.
person stepped out in front of a car and they accidentally hit him and then they fled. But then
Right.
there's the contributing factor. If they would have stayed for the accident, would the person have lived?
Exactly.
Type of a
Or
thing.
would they
And
be
so,
charged
Right.
with it? Yes.
yeah.
Right.
So, we had a situation, same type of situation involving what I call a hit and run. And we denied that claim. And then once we had the appeal hearing, it was discovered in the appeal hearing that the person that was the offender in the hit and run was fleeing from law enforcement. So we've now established that there's a criminal event occurring at the time of the accident. So we overturned that decision and awarded that claim to the applicant because, there was crime occurring, just like a DUI.
Yeah.
So if we know there's a DUI there, oh yeah, absolutely, that's a criminal event occurring in that.
Yeah.
And that action led to the injury or the death of that victim, and we're very quick to award those. Yes.
In honor of Military Appreciation Month, Verizon thought of a lot of different ways we could show our appreciation, like rolling out the red carpet, giving you your own personal marching band, or throwing a bumping shindig. At Verizon, we're doing all that in the form of special military offers. That's why, this month only, we're giving military and veteran families a $200 Verizon gift card and a phone on us with a select trade-in and a new line on select unlimited plans. Think of it as our way of flying a squadron of jets overhead while launching fireworks. Now that's what we call a celebration, because we're proud to serve you. Visit your local Verizon store to learn more. $200 Verizon gift card requires smartphone purchase $799.99 or more with new line on eligible plan. Gift card sent within 8 weeks after receipt of claim. Phone offer requires $799.99 purchase with new smartphone line on Unlimited Ultimate or Postpaid Unlimited Plus. Minimum plan $80 a month with autopay plus taxes and fees for 36 months. Less $800 trade-in or promo credit applied over 36 months. 0% APR. Trade-in must be from Apple, Google, or Samsung. Trade-in and additional terms apply.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But DC politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
Is there a limit on the amount?
I was just going to ask that question.
Like I know that some, again, going back to litigation stuff, we see stuff come in all the time for like MVAs and things.
Mm-hmm.
And medical record or medical costs sometimes get through the roof.
Right.
Yeah. I was kind of wondering if there's like certain kinds of things that you cover and other things that you don't, or is there just a blanket cost sometimes? Or
well, we have a per incident we have a $15,000 cap, and under those subcategories we have caps on that. So unfortunately, right now we can only pay up to $5,000 for funerals, and I'll explain all that here in a minute. We pay for lost wages if someone's out of work because of their injuries. We can pay $400 a week up to 26 weeks. For counseling, we can pay up to like 50 visits, I believe, but it's right around $7,500 total for that. Moving expenses are like $1,000, and then we'll work with the service provider as far as medical and pay a percentage of those and on the behalf of the victim, and try to make that in full when we do that. So what occurred several years ago, and we really were able to start combating it in 23, our funding started, prior to my arrival, our funding started to decrease, and we were averaging about 13% per year. A decrease. We're funded by court fines and fees. We're funded. We get $2 for every traffic ticket. We split the victim assessment fees that are put onto offenders. We split that with the Office of Prosecution Services. We get, like I said earlier, we get a federal grant that We'll pay 75% of all state dollars. We get that returned as 75%. Yeah. And then we are able to obtain restitution from the offenders also. And then in 23, as I was coming into the agency, one of our commissioners and our general counsel was actually going down to the State House and trying to get us some legislative appropriation money. And we were very successful with that and got, I think, $1.5 million for that.
That's great.
Yeah, it was tremendous help. And when I came in, we were low on staff. We were backlogged of claims from everything from fiscal year 2022 moving back. We had 1,900 open claims sitting out there that we just did not have the staff to get to. So we knew we had to do something radical to get all those cleared up. And we went to the governor's office and asked for some special funding and emergency funding, and she awarded us $1 million that year to help with the backlog of those claims. And we brought in some retirees that had worked at Victims Comp in the past and retired. We brought them back in a part-time basis, and we cleared up everything that we cleared up, majority of those within 18 months. Anything that's sitting out there now are part of that hold for trial status. We're waiting on those applicants' cases that they may have a pending felony out there to be adjudicated. So I'm very proud of that work. And we were able to, this past year, to get an additional $500,000 from the appropriation. We pay for all sexual assault forensic exams throughout the state. And that came into being in 1995. And we didn't have, that was an unfunded mandate put on the agency by the legislature. So our 30 years, we had been paying, $500,000 a year to cover these expenses. And we're not upset about having to cover it because victims of sexual assault should not have to pay for forensic exams for prosecution. And my argument when I came on board with this was this is an evidence collecting process. This has nothing to do with victim services. While it takes that burden off the victim, this is collecting evidence for prosecution. Right. And, we're not involved in that business. So we approached the legislature this year for an additional $500,000 to cover those expenses, which is what we average payout for those services per year. And we were fortunate enough to get awarded that. I'm very grateful to the legislature for seeing the need there and stepping up. So our finances is getting better, and I'm hoping in the next few years, as we increase our payouts, our productivity within the agency, that we're going to start getting more federal funding in, and then we'll be able to increase our caps that we currently have on our payouts and start paying people more because they deserve it. They should have, you can't have a funeral for $5,000, and it's shameful that it got to that point. And I want to, our statute says up to $7,500, I believe. And I'm like, I want to go back and increase that to at least $10,000. And
I think that's like the minimum now almost.
Yeah. I think so too. And it's just our funding. We're trying to, we want to be able to pay. I would rather us pay more people something than a few people everything, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
we're in the middle of applying for grants and things now, because we want to. One of the things that we want to do is put up these billboards. And right now what we rely on is actually Lamar to donate the space for that. Mm-hmm. And they're really good about it. The lady that runs the Birmingham area, actually, she's fantastic. She will give us 2 digital billboards. She'll give us one as close to the scene, like where it happened, and then one close to an interstate. And she'll try to run them for like a month.
Yeah.
But then most of the time we get like 2 weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
On the digital boards. But like we have the Steve Pearson case with the Mobile County that we're working. And we actually went to the Mobile County Commission and they sponsored his billboard. So it was the first time that we've been able to run one for a solid year in an area where we need it. And it's great because it helps hit that traffic. And so that's something that we would like to do, is not have to rely, while we appreciate them letting us do that and helping us out with that, we would like to not have to rely on that so that we can run those for longer. Like we have a Huntsville case that we're hopefully is going to be up within the next week or so.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only going to be up for a limited time because that's all the space they have from their, and it's right where we need it too.
I know.
Right.
So it would just be great to have that extra money, in the bank to be able to do that stuff and to, send money to, we have been sending DNA kits for families to submit their DNA to, GED match. That way, when unidentifieds are being pulled, it's hitting that GED match too, if it's not in CODIS, because sometimes they can't always get over to the investigating agency to have their DNA submitted to CODIS.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that we would like to be able to do. And so we're applying to the grants and things like that. And we're trying to bring on a cold case review team.
Right.
That we can go to agencies and say, here, we have this resource available to you. If you've got cases and you don't have time, I know a lot of the issues that they're understaffed, overworked. Hot cases take priority over cold cases. So we have these guys with experience doing this that can look at this for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But we also need to be able to pay them to do that.
Yeah.
So there are things that we're trying to work on too.
We'll talk a little bit about the makeup of our commission.
That's great.
Yeah. So our commission, we have 3 commissioners that I answer to. They're appointed directly by the governor's office, and they serve 4-year terms, and they're stagnated. I think every year, something like that. But one commissioner has to have been a law enforcement officer for a minimum of 10 years, or 10 years investigative experience. And currently that role is held by the sheriff of Lee County, Jay Jones. And then another commissioner has to have either been a direct victim of violent crime, or been closely related to someone who was a victim of violent crime. And that really fits both of our other ones. Dr. Holly Owens sits on our board, and her 2 brothers were victims of homicide in Selma many years ago. And her mother actually was a board member for several years, and then came off, and then Holly took her place. And then Darlene Hutchinson is our newest board member. She's been on for almost 3 years now, I guess. And but she was a student in Troy back in the late 80s, and was kidnapped and sexually assaulted, and would have been murdered had she not was able to get away and call for help. And
she messaged our page, actually.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that name sounded familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she is a tremendous victims advocate.
Yes.
Person was appointed by the previous Trump administration to run Office for Victims of Crime, and did that for a while. And but she's always busy in the State House when it's in session, fighting for victims' rights, and goes around and promotes that. She was a recipient of an award just this week for her service in victims' work. And but anyway, that's the makeup of our commission, and they meet quarterly, and I report to them on what's going on with us and how we're doing, and things we can do better, and what we got going on that's good. So
that's awesome. One of the things I noticed when I went on your site, that there is a link to what says resources.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you are able to provide compensation or not, are there other resources that you refer people to?
We will refer them to victim service groups to help with that, to help with those resources. We'll, if a person is a victim of crime in another state, then they first have to go to that state and apply for compensation, and then we pick up after the other state has capped out on those claims, and we have a link to those places or those state agencies around the country as well. On our resource page, I really try to bolster it to show exactly what services are out there that can help these victims try to find help beyond just us.
Yeah, there's several listed on the site I see.
Yeah.
And
if
it
you
looks like it's really easy to go to the counties. You have a little map on there.
Yes,
So
and you click
cool.
on that county and the specific services for those counties. They're supposed to be listed. Yeah, so that's something. Our website's probably right at a year old now.
Nice.
So, this current one, the other one was built back in 1993, I think. And I'm like, that was one thing we had to do was get us a better avenue for our victims. And
It probably still was pixelated, huh?
Oh, it was. Oh, yeah. It was incredible. I'm like, what is this? And
Felt like you went back in time.
Oh, absolutely. And I wouldn't even. I mean, when this one came online, I'm like, hey, everybody, check us out. We're like, we're 2020 now. We're not.
We're updated.
Oh my heavens!
But yeah, it's just trying to outreach. When I talked about coming into this and not knowing about this place, and when I interviewed, the first interview question they asked me was, so tell us about this agency and what you know about it. Or have you ever heard of it before? And I said, no, I haven't heard of it. And that's a problem, and I'm going to fix that. And so outreach has been very important to me to get the word out that we exist. And what's unique about it, maybe in an unfortunate way, is the common person is not going to know about crime victims compensation. Unless you're a victim of violent crime, you're not going to be aware of this information that's out there, this resource that's out there for you. Yeah. And so, having these conversations with you guys is important to me because y'all share that message. And, I hope we never have another claim come in,
Yeah.
That's pie in the sky kind of talk, but
yeah,
one day maybe we'll never have to pay another victim anything, but the more we're out there.
Well, that's kind of like us. We kind of have that no more cold cases kind of mentality too.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, it's great to have this opportunity to share this program, and I get excited about it because while we are a state agency, we're not your typical state agency. No other state agency does this work where we are engaged in helping people at their most vulnerable time of their life.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And we get emails and messages all the time, even though our focus is on cold cases. And we typically say, the case has got to be 2 years or older and not actively worked. And, there's some discrepancy over what is active, but, we try to limit it because the thing is we don't want to hinder investigations. If there is something that is like they're in the background and they are working that really hard, what we don't want to do is come out and start interfering with anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so when people message us, we get messages all the time for cases that are, sometimes they're only a few months old. Sometimes they're a year old. Sometimes they're getting close to that 2-year mark. And so we'll make a little bit of a different case card for those things to just share in general, but it's not one that we heavily research or do anything about. It's not that we don't want to help the families share that information, but it's more so that we don't want to get in the way of any investigation that's going on. But we do get those messages. And I think this is something that, having resources that we can share with families that come to us with those cases is something that we need to build out so that we can say, hey, look, were you aware that this is out there?
Right.
Because like I said, until I met you, I had no idea that this was even a thing.
Yeah. Exactly. And like I said before. That's not uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
We did, when you're talking about the delay in these families getting answers, and I think part of that may be a culture issue. Is that we're number one, they want answers. Obviously, their loved one is missing or their loved one is dead, and they're trying to, they want. And we talked about the phrase closure, and that it's not closure, but it at least is a point that they can put a pin in to say, okay, now I know what happened.
Yeah.
And now I know who is responsible. But, our society is so instant gratification oriented now.
Yeah.
That, they, and I joke, I've always joked in the police department when CSI came out, great television show. But it was, the concept of what law enforcement can and can't do, from CSI, I spent more time fingerprinting, everything, because they demanded, us show up on the scene and fingerprint something we knew we weren't going to get prints off of, because they watched CSI the other night and they did that and, showed up in a Hummer. And it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
Oh no! And I didn't show up in a Hummer.
I know. Yeah. I know.
No. Families that are like going through it in the present, and like you said, you see these things that are on TV, and they're doing all this stuff, and it looks like it's happening everything's happening within an hour. It kind of sets this unrealistic expectation that things happen so fast. And then there's also, we're a big proponent of like communication, like just talk to them, let them know that you're still working on it. But there are things that are going on sometimes that the agencies can't tell people, like the public's not privy to that. And there's a reason for it. Yeah. And sometimes the family is included in that public grouping because there is a reason for it. And it goes back to, there's that huge confidentiality thing, and you can't have, people going back and telling other people, and, then alibis get created, or there's all kind of manner of things that could happen to mess up the investigation. So there are things that happen in the background that
and
sometimes,
not even purposely. I mean, like, they could just, not, they won't hurt if I tell my grandmother this,
Right.
Yeah.
Or they'll just be saying something in passing and it kind of like part of it slips out or something,
Yeah. Or like, I trust this person with my wife. I can tell them anything, but then they're going to think, oh, well, I trust this other person with my wife and I can tell them. And then before you know it, 40 people know.
That's right. And who's to say that person you trust with your life isn't the one that law enforcement's looking at, So that's important for our victim service advocacy groups to be there in that gap to, our VSOs are so important with the DA's offices to explain these things to these families, to say, these results are not, they're not automatic, and it's going to take some time. We published a book several years ago. We call it the Hope Book. And in it sort of goes through the process, it's got some inspirational things in there to help families, deal with the trauma of losing a loved one or the violence associated with that. But it also has, what's involved in the court proceedings, what's involved in the investigation, and some of these terms that are used during the course of all this. And, it's been a tremendous resource for us to provide for these people that are victims, because they don't, until you experience it or you're in that environment working in it, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you have this trauma, that you experienced the loss of a loved one, or you've been a victim yourself, and you're trying to deal with that. And then the circus of our judicial system alone.
Yes.
It's just,
it's emotional and yeah. And that's another, even if the case is just clear, cut and dry, they know exactly who did it. They've got all the evidence right there. Like, it's just like perfect. It couldn't be any better of a case. When it gets into the hands of the DA, it really depends on their caseload. It also depends on the court's caseload, especially right now, because, Lord, a lot of them are still wrapped up in catching up from COVID.
Yeah.
There was such
That's
this
right.
backlog from everything being shut down that cases are still years behind.
Yep.
And so it takes a long time to work through the court system. Like
Right.
there's actually a case coming up June 3rd. So Brittany Robinson went missing in Mobile in June of 2012. They arrested her dad initially, but they didn't have enough evidence on him to charge him with murder. He served, I think, 2 years of his 10-year sentence, custodial interference. They rearrested him last year and charged him with intentional murder.
Mm-hmm.
His trial starts June 3rd. And they've never found her body. So it's a no-body homicide case.
Yeah.
But this has been ongoing since 2012. And this wasn't for a lack of investigative effort, because I talked to the original investigator on her case.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have her case sitting in front of him, but he could tell me everything about her case. Just off the top. He knew, he had followed it. He had kept it with him through his promotions, changes, because he cared that much about it. You only get one shot at it, right?
That's
so
right.
Like you want your investigators to do the most thorough investigation they can, even if that takes a while, because you get one shot at it.
And you don't think that law enforcement carries that stuff with them? I mean, that's a prime example of that.
Yeah.
They never can let it go, and even after they retire, they've got that cold case sitting out there, it haunts them, until there's resolution to that.
And we have talked to investigators that are retired, and they will always tell us about whatever that one case is.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like the Pearson case that we're working on with the sheriff's office. That's the only case from Sheriff Birch's time as a homicide detective that wasn't solved.
Wow.
And that's why it has just stuck with him.
Yeah. So, wow.
I think that a lot of times agencies do get a bad rap because all it takes is one bad apple.
Yeah.
You can say that about anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at statistic wise, less than 1% of police officers out there are bad apples and all that. And if you compare that, and I'm not justifying it at all, but if you compare that to other professions, it's minuscule compared to other professions that are out there as far as corruption. And
it's just public. So people see it and talk about it. Yeah.
I think that, and I can go down this road too, because I was the president of the Alabama Fraternal Order of Police for many years up until recently. So, I've been a big advocate for law enforcement on the state and the national level. And, the pendulum always tends to swing back to center. Yeah, it'll get out here and we'll be bad guys for a little bit. And then it'll come back to center again, and people will start respecting the law and law enforcement. Yep. And what you find now is, I think the rhetoric is just continually being put out there through social media, through mainstream media, through these movements to continue to vilify. And it's hard. I think the pendulum is coming back around. It's not quite to center yet, and but it's been a challenge. It's really a balancing act between what the public is willing to accept to keep our cities safe, and keeping those officers safe and keeping them in check in what they do. So it's really interesting in my role here in this agent at Victims Comp. I mean, I've had people come to me, "You were a police officer." "Yeah." "What made you want to do this job?" And I'm like, "What do you think we do? Yeah. We serve victims every day. We go out and try to protect victims and provide them, resolution on their cases and things like that. Yeah. This is just a different way of doing it."
Yeah.
Oh, well, I really didn't think about that.
Yeah.
When we started this, there are certain cases where it's really hard to look at it and say there wasn't some kind of interference or involvement or something when you start looking at when you have all this stuff in front of you. And so I think when we first started, I don't know that I can speak necessarily for Mary on this, but for me, that I already had this idea in my head that like, oh, gosh, we have got some investigative issues here in Alabama that are like absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go so far as to say that's not the case right now, because like I do think there are cases that we've looked at that we're like, come on. I mean, like that one in Birmingham where the dude's running around with, 5 murder related charges. But I also, having done this now since we're on our 3-year anniversary,
Yep.
I have a different perspective on it, especially in the last like 6 to 9 months. We have had this, I don't know, increase in momentum.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's more that we're kind of more established at this point. We have a little bit more of a foothold. And so agencies are recognizing us a little bit more as people that they can trust. And so we're having more interaction with them, which gives us a broader perspective of kind of what they're dealing with and what they're going through and the steps that they've taken. And so we're talking to investigators more because they're being a little bit more open-minded. And I think that is one, because they do have to be careful about who they share information with.
Right.
I get it, because you see things come out and it's like, oh, that was so out of context.
Yeah.
That's not what that should have been.
Yeah.
After researching it and seeing how many discrepancies are in the media across cases, you do see where there's this kind of skewed perspective. But it has really just kind of given it's just opened my eyes to this whole new world, essentially. And given me a much better understanding of challenges that different agencies face in investigations. And then a lot of times it boils down to the fact that people aren't willing to talk to them.
That's absolutely.
It's not always investigative issues. Like, there are so many investigators that we've talked to that are really good investigators.
Mm-hmm.
And we always know which ones are the really good ones because they talk to us.
Well, and I look at it this way: as your organization grows, and you gain solid footing in this environment, you're a resource that those investigators can rely on that they may not have, or there's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
And those guys go from case to case to case. And while they're working multiple cases at a time, things tend to fall off, and that's what y'all are here for, because the lead has run cold, and those guys have just done everything that they can, but they can't just stop and work on that one case. They've got a caseload of 50 to 100 cases, perhaps, depending on where they live or where they work. And so, you guys, I see as a resource for them to sort of pick up and do that work behind the scenes to help them resolve these cases. And I think part of the what you're seeing too is, well, we're having a law enforcement shortage around the country, and particularly in the state of Alabama. Mm-hmm. And so you've got a lot of retirees that experience has left. You're not keeping these officers long enough to get them experience in just the basic police work in order to build their skills to be an investigator. And maybe they're thrown into that investigative role a little too earlier or too soon than they should be, because you've got to get somebody out there to take care of that crime. Mm-hmm. You're relying on that. The public is relying on you, the police officer, to solve these crimes. And our investigators, like I said, because of the lack of manpower, they're just throwing whatever they can out there to just get the job done the best they can.
Yeah. That was one of the things that we had initially talked to a state rep about. We're pushing for legislative action to establish cold case policies and procedures and mandating entry of missing persons into the state and national databases. Because what we see is that the numbers in NamUs don't match the number in ALEA. And there's it varies. I think it's decreased at this point, but at one point there was like a 60 to 65 person difference between the two databases. And so then some people, and we knew that there were some people that weren't in either one of those. So we were like, where can you go to find a good total number? And it's like, well, you can't. There is nowhere.
No.
And it's not even just those two databases. I mean, you can go look in other databases and there's a discrepancy between all of them.
Yeah.
Right.
So
one of the things we'd heard was, well, I'll put them in one or the other, but not both because that's just tedious. So I've already been trying to like brainstorm a way to come up with a software that would allow them to input this information one time, but distribute it to both.
Yeah.
Or both databases, just to eliminate that extra step because I don't blame them. That gets to be a lot when you're having to enter that many details.
Absolutely. And I would work if the state has one, it's probably ran through CGIS. Well, probably
Fusion Center runs it.
Fusion Center. Well, that's that's right down the door from them. So, they would be the ones to probably help facilitate that legislation.
That I was actually going to talk to them about. Like, all right, let's talk about how your stuff's put in versus NamUs. Like, what can we do to kind of make this into one step and have it go everywhere? Because like if they're not being entered, then you're missing your largest free resource, which is the public.
And the challenges involved in that. And then the funding aspect of that, it's funny, the legislature is very quick to create, databases and, mandatory reporting to ALEA and to, the AG and all these other people, but they ain't quick to throw some money in there to hire those people to handle that. Trying to, get our agency running more efficiently and serving our victims in a better capacity. That needs to be done yesterday. I ain't got time to wait on it for tomorrow.
No, I get that. I get that. Well, tell us how people can find you.
Just gonna say
absolutely. You can reach us through on our website at acvcc.alabama.gov. And then you can contact us by phone. It's area code 334-290-4420. And, if there's questions about whether eligibility is there or not, we'll be happy to answer those. And, always looking for the opportunity to help these victims and try to make their lives, I say better is not the right word, but, try to take, like I said earlier, taking the burden off of them that they've incurred for the victimization.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
It has been so awesome talking with you. I'm so glad that you were able to come and talk with us tonight.
Well, thank you for allowing me to do this. This is great. I really enjoyed this, and love to do it again at some point.
Yeah, we'll have to have you come back on.
Yeah, have you come do a series,
Yeah. Since Alabama Cold Case Advocacy's creation, we have dedicated innumerable hours to researching and networking in an effort to provide the largest platform we can to the cases we share. We shoulder all associated expenses with Alabama Cold Case Advocacy out of our own pocket, including the subscription fees for researching and production of the Unforgotten podcast to provide a cost-free avenue for the victims' families of those cases.
We hope you will join in our efforts to raise awareness of Alabama's missing and murdered and support these families who have been forced to carry the immeasurable loss of their loved ones and the fight for answers. If you appreciate our mission and you are inspired to make a donation, your extra support will enable the ACCA to continue our research, share the cold cases, and help those families know that they are also unforgotten.
Unforgotten is an Alabama Cold Case Advocacy podcast, recorded in conjunction with Riverside FM, hosted and distributed by Red Circle to your favorite podcast platforms. Content, research, artwork, and production are by Sellers and Stormy of Alabama Cold Case Advocacy. Credits for music, sound clips, special mentions, and research sources can be found in each episode's description. Your support helps us continue producing Unforgotten and further Alabama Cold Case's mission of advocacy and awareness. There are a few ways you can help us light the path. Make a one-time or monthly donation to Unforgotten through Red Circle, sign up for a one-time or recurring donation through the ACCA website, or subscribe to the Unforgotten Patreon channel for early access to ad-free episodes. You will find the links for all three in our episode descriptions. Another cost-free way to be of great help is to follow us on social media. But most importantly, whatever you do, tell everyone you know about these cases. Sharing their stories is one of the most effective ways to help find resolution for Alabama's cold cases. Be the spark. Thank you for listening, and until next time, remember, justice may be delayed, but the victims and their families remain unforgotten.
Good. You did good on that one.
Thanks.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But DC politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
In honor of Military Appreciation Month, Verizon thought of a lot of different ways we could show our appreciation, like rolling out the red carpet, giving you your own personal marching band, or throwing a bumping shindig. At Verizon, we're doing all that in the form of special military offers. That's why, this month only, we're giving military and veteran families a $200 Verizon gift card and a phone on us, with a select trade-in and a new line on select unlimited plans. Think of it as our way of flying a squadron of jets overhead while launching fireworks. Now that's what we call a celebration, because we're proud to serve you. Visit your local Verizon store to learn more. $200 Verizon gift card requires smartphone purchase $799.99 or more with new line on eligible plan. Gift card sent within 8 weeks after receipt of claim. Phone offer requires $799.99 purchase with new smartphone line on unlimited ultimate or postpaid unlimited plus. Minimum plan $80 a month with autopay plus taxes and fees for 36 months. Less $800 trade-in or promo credit applied over 36 months. 0% APR. Trade-in must be from Apple, Google, or Samsung. Trade-in and additional terms apply.